It had been a somber few weeks since the violent confrontation with the Whitby search party. Longleaf was only sleeping a few hours a night since the attack. He was worried of more coming. Joan, Gentlefern, and Acorn, among the normal chores, had also been foraging for more quartz for Joan to enchant. So far, she had successfully fused her abilities of fire control, levitation, and plant sprouting into the quartz for the others to use. Just as the days were forming a common routine again, up on the roof where Longleaf liked to keep watch, he spotted a single horse and carriage struggling its way through the forest. His hands gripped his musket tightly with tension, and he watched it carefully. He made a pss-pss whisper sound to get the attention of Acorn, who was kneeling in the mushroom garden with her quartz. She was trying to grow them and conduct the magics within the sprouting fungus. She turned to look at her husband and then into the forest to see the wheel finally break off the carriage, bringing them to a full stop. Joan could hear Longleaf and Acorn talking in Chikoi from inside the cabin. She understood the words stranger and enemy from the talking, and put Hannah into her crib and went outside to see what was going on. By now, the woman was out of the carriage and trying to diagnose the damage to the wheel. "Brana?" Joan asked, meaning woman in Chikoi. When the woman realized fixing it was not an option, she looked around the forest and spotted them. A few moments of awkward looks, and then she waved. Joan and Acorn waved back, but Longleaf just kept the musket stock tight to his shoulder. It was not until the woman pulled her daughter from the carriage and carried her through the woods that his alert behavior would subside. The girl looked about 10 years of age, and her arms hung limp while being carried. Joan and Acorn walked with a hurry to help her, and they met about halfway. The mother was almost in a panic. "My daughter's very sick. Do you have food, water, anything?" Joan helped carry the girl. "Yes, we can help. Bring her over." All three women worked together and got the girl inside. Acorn started giving the child water as Joan was introduced. "I'm Susan. This is my daughter Charlotte." Joan smiled, hoping it would calm Susan. "I'm Joan. This is Acorn. The man on the roof is her husband Longleaf, and his other wife Gentlefern is out collecting materials for us." Susan stared a few minutes. Joan? Joan Emmeline? Now Joan stared back, her warm smile almost gone. But as Joan's smile left, Susan gave one. You're why we're out here. I was looking for you. I heard of your sorcery and craft. My daughter, the doctors tell me she will die. Nothing can be done." Joan let out a sigh of relief. "What's her ailment?" Susan went to her daughter Charlotte, who was laying in the bed. "A cough, fevers." Joan knelt to Charlotte, looking her over. Charlotte's cough was violent and deep. Joan could hear the churning of fluid in her lungs. "Acorn, could you get Longleaf, please?" Acorn gave a nod and with a hustle went outside to call Longleaf in. When he entered, Joan was collecting mushrooms from their storage shelf. She was making the same recipe she used for the cuts and scrapes, and the same she used for the Chikoi feet when they all first arrived. Joan sparked a fire and made the mushroom mixture hover over the heat and smoke. Susan started to shake, and then she froze at the magic's display. Longleaf gave a smirk. It was fun seeing others react to the magics, and he wondered if he made the same face the first time he saw them. "It's really all true." Joan turned back to Susan after her question to respond. "The abilities are true, although the version of events you heard are probably askew and biased." Susan seemed reluctant to respond, but her silence was enough confirmation. The mushrooms were drying out over the heat of the fire by now. Joan flew them to the table and into a bowl, then reached back for them. "Susan, could you sit Charlotte up, please?" She had to get Longleaf's help to even get her upright. Joan stirred the mushroom chips and chunks in the bowl with her finger, adding even more heat to them, then held it under Charlotte's face. The mushrooms were smoldering and a white misting smoke came from them. "Let her breathe it in best she can." Susan nodded. "It's okay, Charlotte. We found Joan. Do as she says." Charlotte tried to inhale best she could through her wheezing. The mist was being pulled into her nostrils with each inhale. Once the mushrooms were all but ash, Joan set them aside, and Susan and Longleaf laid Charlotte down to sleep. "Will this help her?" Susan asked with a sniffle of hope. Joan took her outside where the setting sun was lowering. "This recipe has cured injuries. I have to admit, I don't know if it affects an illness." Gentlefern approached, having found a good supply of quartz. Introductions were made, and she went to join Acorn inside to sit with Charlotte. They prepared a meal for Susan and they all had dinner together. Susan explained how her husband Nicholas did not approve of her decision to find Joan and told her to never come back if she left. After dinner was a long and mostly sleepless night for Susan. Every cough Charlotte made she would check with worry. But it wasn't until sunrise that Susan woke up and realized that she had actually slept. Charlotte had not coughed. She checked her. She was not as warm, and her wheezing was much softer now. "Joan, Joan," she called. Joan, while rubbing her eyes, came out. "Look at her. Is it working?" Joan inspected Charlotte as well. "She does seem less warm. Let's give her another dose." Sure enough, as the day went on, and every few hours giving Charlotte another dose, she started to turn the corner. Her fever broke and was even able to stand on her own once again. Susan was of course thrilled, but also stranded now, with a broken carriage and a disapproving husband at home. When Joan suggested she should stay, she accepted. And should Charlotte fall ill again, she figured it was a good idea to remain near Joan. The next week was busy. Everyone chipped in and helped construct a third cabin now for Susan and Charlotte, and simultaneously building a larger structure. It was difficult at first and took some trial and error, but after about 2 weeks they had built a decent-sized chapel. No one besides Joan knew what it was yet, though. But as the pews and altar were being constructed, they started to figure it out pretty quickly. It was early on a Friday morning. Joan gathered everyone to the new chapel. Joan could never seem to levitate people, including herself. Animals for some reason could be lifted, but not humans. She gave her first sermon, making a large flat rock levitate behind her. It was hidden by the altar. To her small audience, it looked as if she was hovering on her own. A bit of a charlatan's trick, but it grabbed their attention very well. She wanted to share her thoughts and theories with anyone that would listen, and right then, everyone listened. She shared her theories of connections with nature, that Chana lived in this world through her. A theory that she was able to back up with the fact that Longleaf, still to that day, had never gotten a quartz to work for himself. She told them that Chana can only channel through women like herself. The natives enjoyed the magics on display, but had trouble understanding the entire lecture. However, Charlotte and Susan hung on every word. Joan could feel their devotion growing, and like a parasite she gladly pulled and stored the energies from them. The awe and wonder and respect from them was intoxicating, and had created a tradition every Friday morning from that day forward that Joan would hold a sermon. This went on for many months. Longleaf, Acorn, and Gentlefern were growing more fluent in English, while Joan, Charlotte, and Susan were learning Chicoy. Charlotte, being a child, absorbed their language like a sponge, and would often help translate now. This was especially useful during the sermons. With Joan's words reaching the 3 natives, she felt a surge of energy every week from it, and it made her magic cast easier, and it made her feel alive. It was around this time that Joan had crafted hats for all the females, a wide brim hat with a point. She instructed them during a sermon to wear this hat as much as possible. Her theory was the point would act as an antenna and help pull magics to them through the air. Joan was convinced it worked. The tingles of nature were a constant trickle to her when she was wearing it. Joan wanted more, though. Through the sermons, she had found her path. She needed more followers. She wanted to turn her homestead into a commune. She was living with people who were proof that some would respect and adore her for her abilities. This was the realization that would change everything. It started as a normal sermon, except she had instructed Charlotte to skip this particular day and stay with Hannah. Joan spoke of the importance of numbers and that people were power. She spoke of how Hannah will be raised in this special bubble they created and would only know the world of wonder and magics. She had everyone form a line, and one by one, she spoon-fed them the aphrodisiac recipe she had created all that time ago. She also took a spoonful herself. They spent almost the entire day in the chapel inside while the effects kept hold of them. They took turns with Longleaf, the 3 women all determined to create their own new members of Joan's movement and follow her wishes. And at the very end, Longleaf embraced the Chana, and she too would participate in what would later be called the ritual of life. Longleaf spent much time with Charlotte and Hannah in the following weeks. Joan and the other 3 women were spending almost every day in the forest, deep in meditations, while Joan connected to each of them, the 4 growing lives inside them, and influencing the babies to be female. She wanted casters and spell weavers, She wanted to find another girl that was a natural like her and did not rely on court spells. The pregnancies would take time, as well as the years as small children. Joan knew that wasn't enough, but she had already schemed another plan. She packed Jennifer in a bag with water and some food, a broom, and a few levitation quartz. She taught her how to fly, and with Charlotte helping explain, she instructed Jennifer to return to the tribe, her tribe, and bring as many women back as she could. Tell them you live with the Chana. Tell them I am real, and bring new ears and souls to hear my teachings. Jennifer made sure everyone received a goodbye hug, and Longleaf waved goodbye as she flew off. Next episode, we will see how the first missions trip of Joan's movement will go. What will Jennifer do, seeing her tribe and her home again after so long? Will her loyalty remain with Joan? And how will her family and friends, who she grew up with, react when they see the magic she can wield?